McLaughlin, are you ready?
Yes.
Proceed.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I'd like to thank you. I'm here today to testify on behalf of House Bill 8143, and I would like to start by saying I would thank the committee for the support that this bill in particular is of a secular nature. The Woonsocket Monument Bill and monuments throughout this country and our nation are of a secular nature. Their origin and placement time go from generations to generations. They've been handed down in squares throughout our communities, cities, and towns. They tell a story of heroic valor. They also give a time and place and a documentation which is of constitutional value to our nation. I will address Arlington Cemetery, Gettysburg, Normandy, all of these monuments, whether they have a cross, a Star of David, a crescent, have a story. In our cities and towns and communities, also police and fire. They are of value to our community. And I would like to, this bill simply states a Category 1 memorial item by its designation is said not to be an establishment of a state or religion or a violation of our state constitution. This is what this bill simply states. The act also provides that it shall be the policy of the state to defend non-governmental challenges to the placement, continued existence of these memorials. This bill does not prohibit any person from challenging whether a particular monument constitutes a violation of the Constitution, particularly the separation of church and state. But this is a way for the state to identify an item and express that the state's views this particular memorial does not constitute an establishment of religion. The act does prohibit the award of attorney fees for action when a party challenges the designation of placement of a Category 1 memorial item. As part of the legislature, we need to be careful to respect all rights and safeguard against the establishment of state religion. But I believe this bill serves a good purpose. It allows a state or municipality acting through its duly elected officials to clarify instances of items that are in question. Do you have any questions?
Representative Marcello has a question.
Thank you, Representative McLaughlin, and I thank you for this piece of legislation. And I know that when we held the final two bills for further study, I know that you were a little upset about that based on your reaction. But
Most definitely.
I understand that, but I want you to understand that this is the first time we're hearing this bill, obviously, and it was just introduced a couple of weeks ago. So as you know, most of the bills get more than one hearing, and we try to work it through. So, but my question is, and your last point, it says, any elected Rhode Island state or municipal official may identify and designate a Category 1 memorial item, and then you define what a Category 1. For instance, so any elected official, if you, I think you might want to try to limit that to, like, say, like the city of Woonsocket, you might want maybe the mayor to do it, or maybe the city council, but as it states right now, any one of us could go along around the state and say, that's a Category 1 memorial, that's a Category 1 memorial, and designate it. So I think there's got to be a process where it occurs, and I think your language, as stated, at least in that one section, is way too broad, because there are, in my town, for instance, we elect people from the Board of Assessment Review. They would be an elected official who would have the authority under the statute to designate a Category 1 memorial. So I think that part of the language at least needs some work as to how you go about designating a monument such as the ones that you're concerned with as a Category 1 memorial.
This is a point well taken.
Okay, that's why we held bills for further study.
Representative, and also I have a sub-A
Okay.
in reference to the, it's going to be, this will be incorporated
Okay,
in this, in the sub-A, it basically on the $1 million.
yep,
Okay. In the bill, we're going to define it as a reasonable amount to,
Okay.
you know, to offset any legal challenges to this.
and the other comment that I would just like to make is on that fund that you establish, you basically say that the winner doesn't get the legal fees, basically. Under current federal law, if you bring an action to violate, that alleges a violation of civil rights, under the federal statute, the winner automatically gets reasonable attorney's fees for prosecuting that action. And I'm not so sure, because federal law is supreme over state law, that the passage or this provision of that law would meet constitutional Supremacy Clause muster.
I would maintain with all due respect the way this Category 1 memorial is worded, that it wouldn't imply to federal statute.
I'm not talking about the designation. I'm talking about the challenge, the legal challenge. And if someone to bring a challenge against a monument, which
Yes.
could happen under the federal law, that the legal fees are awarded under federal law, and that this would be inconsistent with that challenge. This law would be inconsistent with the federal law.
I believe-
Not on a designation issue. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about
On
the legal fees part
On the
of it.
legal fees, we could make modifications on it
Okay.
too.
I just wanted to point those out, and that's why we hold bills for further study to try to work through these.
But with that said, I would ask you, members of this committee, to basically take this bill into consideration, because I believe it's bigger than all of us. I believe, I firmly believe with my heart and soul that we wouldn't have a First Amendment or any constitutional rights had it not been for the people that these memorials are dedicated to.
That's a very fair point.
Thank you. With that said, I
Are there other questions for the sponsor? There being none, Representative Ozanaro?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for taking this time. I'm in support of this bill. I know it's going to need some work. As we say, I'm a little more attuned to holding bills for further study, only because I've been here a couple of years more than Rep. McLaughlin has. But he makes a good point. You know, I don't have anything written down, so I'm just going to speak from the top of my head. After we got through with the Cranston case of the plaque having to come down and so on, and then I hear on the news that someone driving by had a bad feeling or was in opposition to this monument that's in Woonsocket that had been there for some 80-odd years, I believe, or more. The monument dedicated to some fine people that made the ultimate sacrifice for all of us in this country, and for someone to be offended by a cross that I don't think it said Catholic, I don't think it said Jewish, I don't think it said anything. It was a cross on top of a monument for these people that lost their lives for us. Their families were given the honor of having this monument put up in Woonsocket or wherever it might be. And for someone to just say, I don't like that, it's got to go. I tell you, I was outraged. My blood boiled. I think this legislation can be good once it's massaged and worked out, get the proper language in there. I think it needs to be, and I hope that this committee will get this bill, work with it, and come back. If Rep. McLaughlin has a sub-A to get in, he needs to get that in for you people to look at. The people on this committee have done a monumental job all year, and I really appreciate everything you people do on this committee, because it's a tough one. But I am in favor of this, and it needs to be worked out. We've got to stop letting the minority of people dictate what the majority of people want in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ozanaro. Are there questions for the representative? Mr. Capezza?
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and honorable members of the committee. I come before you tonight as a citizen and a veteran. I am not representing the organization that I normally represent tonight. I am representing myself, but I know I speak for many other people. As a veteran of the Vietnam War, I was one of the lucky ones. I came home, but I had several friends that didn't come home. When I drive by a monument, regardless of where it may be, I don't see a religious symbol. I see a symbol that is honoring and respecting the Americans that died for this country. Just because that symbol may be a cross has no religious effect when I look at it. As a matter of fact, all through history, crosses have been used to honor our dead. And I don't think you can consider some of them a religious symbol. For example, in Arlington National Cemetery, there is a Canadian Cross of Sacrifice that was given to this country after World War I. Subsequent, it also then honored veterans who were killed in the line of duty, World War II and Korea. This cross has a sword on it. I don't think anybody could look at that cross and say a sword is a religious figure. Arlington National Cemetery, every cross is a blank cross with the exception of the name and rank of the person on it. As a matter of fact, I was interested today and I looked up the definition of cross in Blacklaw's dictionary. And there are actually 4 different types of crosses. And one of the crosses we have is known as the St. Andrew's Cross. Well, interesting to know, the St. Andrew's Cross is an actual X cross. And I don't think we can look at that cross as being a religious figure, because as you know, many people who can't sign their name legally can sign a document with an X. But yet that's called the St. Andrew's Cross. There's also a St. Anthony's Cross. St. Anthony's Cross is formed in the shape of a T. We use the letter T every day of the week. I don't think we can consider that a religious cross just because it's called St. Andrew's Cross. The cross that we see in most cemeteries, military cemeteries, this happens to be Normandy, is more closely related to the Greek cross. And the Greek cross basically is the cross you see here with intersecting beams closer to the center. I don't think we can consider a Greek cross a religious symbol. So I don't think that there should even be a need for legislation like this. How unfortunately there is, because when we look at a cross, I think most people look at it when it's attached to a monument as the respect for a military person, or, and I'll go one step further because we also have monuments now that honor police officers or firefighters that have died in the line of duty. And it doesn't matter what religion or whether they had a religion at all on the designee of that cross. We are honoring and respecting our dead, and that's all that monument is doing. And that's what it's done throughout the years. And I agree with the two reps. The bill does need some work. Once it's worked on, I think it'll be a good bill, and I think it's a bill that we need. And as Representative Azanaro said, I think it's about time we start worrying about the majority and not a few minorities who really are making way too much of something that the intent was not there for. I thank you for your time.
Mr. Capezza, you spoke about Greek crosses and crosses of other nationalities and what they look like, but what do they signify? Does the Greek cross signify, as my understanding is, that the Catholic cross signifies the cross on which Christ was crucified?
Well, according to the definition, it doesn't say what it signifies. It just labels these crosses on what they are. And I don't think even a regular cross, plain cross known as a crucifix, for example, unless it actually has the statue on it, designates anything. I believe
it's just two pieces of wood or plastic
attached,
or metal or whatever.
however they're attached, whether they're nailed, glued, or whatever. There is
molded
no
as one.
religious designation to it. Now, the crucifix with a statue of the body of Christ on it, that's what I believe makes it a religious symbol. Not the mere fact that it may be shaped in a sign of, of what commonly is known as a crucifix. Many people will refer it to a cross as a crucifix, but that is not a crucifix until it actually has a figure on it. Then it becomes a crucifix.
But is this according to Tony Capezza, or is this according to a dictionary or other research?
That's my opinion.
Okay.
And again, like I said, I'm just going by Black's Law Dictionary on how they describe the different crosses and the designation that was given to them. I don't think they are, in Black's Law Dictionary, they're referring to a religious cross. They are referring to the different type crosses that there are and the designation that's been given to them. And that was the point I was trying to make. Just because it's called St. Anthony's Cross or St. Andrew's Cross has no religious designation to it. It's a name that's been given to that particular symbol. And
With no history as to St. Anthony or St. Anne and what they signify to some
Correct.
religious group.
Correct. They're using the shape of the symbol, actually.
And that's all it refers to.
Right.
Representative Morrison?
Sir, when you did your research on Arlington National Cemetery, which has white granite, marble, I'm not exactly sure what they're made out of, but did you come across anything that signified what that cross, and was that, like you had said prior, it signified an honor. It did not signify a religion. Did you come across anything in why Arlington National Cemetery, which are most honored lost heroes are buried? Did you come across anything that signified what you want to call that cross was?
I don't understand the question on what.
It's probably a poor question. What I'm trying to say is Arlington National Cemetery is full of crosses.
Correct.
In doing your research, did anything come across you? Do you have anything that said that cross signified a religion?
No. No. It strictly has, and I've visited Arlington numerous times, and if you look at the cross, the only thing the cross will designate is the rank and the person's name and the date. Now, Unlike the Jewish faith, they do have a Star of David on the graves of Jewish veterans.
Thank you, sir. I was not, I just wanted to see if you had any, if there was any designation. There is no designation. It's just a cross.
Right. I mean, I think, like, when you say designation, to me, what that means, and I'm just going to use this as an example, it may have a figure of a saint or something on it, or a medallion or something, which it doesn't have any of that on the cross.
Doesn't designate any.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your time.
Doesn't designate any religion.
No.
There being no further. There being no further. I'm sorry, Representative Chippendale.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service to our country. And I would ask, do you see, first of all, I think to Mr. Capezza, to your question, I saw myself some photographs of Arlington Cemetery that had crescents, which I believe are indicative of the Islamic faith. I also saw some figures that I don't understand, but they were explained as Wiccan figures that were also in Arlington. So there seems to be a fair distribution of the various symbols. With this this move that your legislation, Representative McLaughlin, is seeking to address, do you feel that perhaps the flag of South Carolina, which has a crescent on it, could be perceived as representing the Islamic faith, and therefore anywhere the flag of South Carolina is flown would be a violation of exactly what these folks are trying to prevent with this monument?
Absolutely not. The intent, of my bill in this memorial, there again, I'll reiterate, it's of secular value. The monument itself is constitutional. It gives, like the crosses Tony spoke of, it gives name, rank, serial number, time and date, served, killed in action, of these warriors, these veterans. Whatever symbolizes, their state, no. That's not unconstitutional. If they came from Rhode Island, up north here, we had the Pennsylvania division, and the Maine division, the Rainbow divisions. From our revolution up till now, we actually have monuments from our revolution, with dates, times, places that these warriors, these patriots laid down their lives. Like Tony, Screaming Eagles, 101st Airborne, Sammy, Vietnam veteran, myself, combat veteran. I look, but we were there to do a job. We were lucky. We came back, all right? It's the fallen heroes that I will not have them disrespected. So there again, I want to reiterate, we would not have a constitution or, freedom of speech, any amendments, if these people did not lay down their lives for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next,
Madam Chair, could I just clarify something?
Representative Arzanero.
I am considered a veteran. I served during the time of the Vietnam War, but I was fortunate enough not to go over there, so I don't want to have anything saying that.
Sammy, you trained the troops.
I did. That's what I did.
All right.
My job was to train the troops at Fort Dix, and they went over, not me, thank God.
Thank you, Sam,
Thank
for
you.
that clarification.
Thank you. Representative Robert Phillips and Representative Spencer Dickinson. Representative Ray Gallison had signed up to testify but does not seem to be here. Retired General Centracchio. Representative Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. There's not a lot more I can add to what has been said already, except a few points, and also to let people know that I am not a veteran. I have not been able to be in the service because of a medical issue, but I come from a family, a vast family of veterans, 20-year, 30-year, Vietnam, and to have somebody come up and state that a plain white cross, 2 pieces of wood in the shape of a T, is offensive for somebody that did serve their country, did lose their lives, is absolutely ludicrous. What next? I drove by 2 nights ago where on the street, sidewalk on the street, was a mailbox on 2 pieces of wood in the shape of a T. If somebody wanted to stretch it, could they stretch that as it being a cross? Possibly. Is it offensive? I don't know. But going to the purpose of the cross itself, well before Christ was born, the cross was used as a symbol of death. They hung people on the crosses back in those days as a torture, as a ways of demeaning people that were either criminals or people that went against the organized governments. And naturally, since Christ was also crucified on the cross or on the T, a lot of religions have associated that since that day, but the origin of the cross was well before the Christ time and was used as a symbol of death. And that's what these are used for now.
Excuse me, when it was used, seen as a symbol of death and before the time of Christ and the crucifixion, was it something that would be on the grave or memorial to a deceased hero?
That I don't know. I wasn't there, so I couldn't tell you.
If you could follow up on that research, because I find that the concept of the cross being a symbol of death, that's new to me. So if you could follow up, or someone would, I think that would be interesting.
I could try to do some research, that's fine.
As to whether it was something that was used as a symbol of honor on...
Actually, it was a symbol of dishonor, for the most part, because there were a lot of criminals that were put on the cross to be used as examples to try and keep people from committing other crimes.
A symbol of dishonor.
At that point, because people were crucified on it. But since Jesus Christ was crucified too, a lot of organizations since then, a lot of religions have assumed the cross itself to be a symbol in religion, but it's also a symbol of just death itself. Now, specifically on this, on the issue that was brought up, because it is Woonsocket that pretty much has brought this to light, this monument, this war memorial, is in a gully off the side of a road. So the person that is, quote-unquote, offended by it had to be leaving the train, the site of their driving, to look at this monument. So they are actually in violation of a law by taking their eyes off the road. So, I mean, we can mix match this any way we want to, but to push the issue that it's a symbol of a religion or trying to say that we are promoting a specific religion is absolutely not true. It's plain white. It doesn't have any verbiage on it, any signs except that it's painted white. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Members of the committee.
Are there questions for Representative Phillips? Thank you. Representative Dickinson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We all look into legislation and see something different. There's no question that the Woonsocket Cross in front of the fire station is what has prompted this issue. But what I see when I look into the bill is something which is intended to protect the things which people in the state of Rhode Island find to have traditional cultural value, regardless of whether they may or may not, to some people, also have religious significance. I think the important point here is that the people care about structures, monuments, inscriptions, icons, and maybe something else too, but essentially I think that covers it. And they are all over our state. It could be that tomorrow someone will walk past something, point to it, and say, I'm offended by that. We don't know where they are. There may be hundreds of them. And we, because we're a small state, and maybe because some of these cities and towns, such as Woonsocket, are in under financial stress at this time, we are vulnerable to people who want to take advantage of us for whatever their own reasons may be. And it's sometimes financial, and it may be genuine or it may not be. But I think that one of the intentions of the bill is for the state of Rhode Island to stand behind the people of Rhode Island and not allow individual towns to be singled out in a divide and conquer mode, to be defeated on issues which essentially pertain to the cultural values of the people of the state. There is no question that it's going to be military to a large extent, but that's not, as I understand it, that's not the only issue. When it comes to understanding some of the symbols, it seems to me that the state of Rhode Island should stand up for its own rights. The federal government has put a arguably religious inscription on the currency in my pocket and on federal buildings in Washington, D.C., and all over Arlington Cemetery. The nation of France has given hundreds of acres which are the property of you and me as citizens of the United States government, and on those acres, and I've seen them, are rows and rows of white marble crosses which have tremendous emotional significance to anyone who goes there and understands that they represent the efforts of individual Americans to protect our freedom. And it concerns me that which are the property of you and me as citizens of the United States government, and on those acres, and I've seen them, are rows and rows of white marble crosses which have tremendous emotional significance to anyone who goes there and understands that they represent the efforts of individual Americans to protect our freedom. And it concerns me that anyone could challenge the entire United States or the city of Woonsocket and take that away from us. We treasure it. You don't need to hear my story about my military, my dad, my sons, but it matters to us. And I am certain that there are hundreds of thousands of Rhode Islanders who have sent their children, their loved ones into combat, who treasure these monuments, and other monuments may not be military related. But I think the point is that they have cultural value, they have traditional value. And we shouldn't allow people in Wisconsin to tell us what to do. So the effect of the bill, as I read it, would be for the state of Rhode Island to make a statement and come down on the record as stating that it is not the intent of the state of Rhode Island that these monuments, structures, inscriptions, or icons are in opposition to the U.S. Constitution. In fact, I think I don't have the wording right in front of me, but essentially it says the existence of one of these items does not constitute, and then it uses the words of the federal Constitution, it does not constitute the making of a law regarding a religion. Having stated that, and also having stated the state of Rhode Island's intention to defend it, I think people are going to leave us alone. But I think as long as the city of Woonsocket, in its current financial situation, can be vulnerable, somebody out there will take advantage of us for publicity or financial gain or possibly even genuine intent. But I think that we as a legislature, and I as a legislator, I think we should stand up for the values, traditions, and expectations of our people. And as we approach Memorial Day, I can't say it as well as Representative McLaughlin said it, but there's an old saying, take a little different approach to it. There's a Russian saying, which is, if you don't respect your own army, you will soon find yourself respecting someone else's. If I hadn't served in the Army, if I hadn't had 2 sons in the Army, if my dad hadn't been in the Navy, I would still feel this way. We have something here. The fact that I'm able to address you and that we can intelligently consider legislation in this room and in this state is only because those Americans gave their lives and their time, those who came back. We owe them respect, and I can't imagine that we would allow someone to come from anywhere and try to take our traditions and our cultural items away from us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Dickinson. General Citracchio?
Madam Chair, committee members, this process that we've experienced for the last few hours is called democracy. It's not a very easy thing from time to time, but on one side we have those that make the law, and on the other side we have those of us who either suffer the consequences or enjoy the results. But in between, someone gave their life so that we could be here having this healthy debate. In the midst of all this, I would suggest that we should all just use a little bit of common sense as we understand exactly what we're debating here and what we're discussing. So let me reflect, and I'll paraphrase it the best I can. George Washington said, basically around circa 1781, that unless you take care of our veterans, you cannot possibly expect to raise future armies to defend our democracy. Now, he said that. If he was seated here at this table today, he'd probably be amazed that we're still having this debate some 200 and change years later. But the common sense approach from time to time is abused. Those that look at our Constitution must see that this whole country was based upon a belief in a creator that gave us certain rights. That creator could be a different individual to as many people as there are on the face of this earth. But at some point, it never talks about, what it does talk about is the Constitution, in essence, tells us that the Congress shall make no law to establish a religion, nor shall it make a law to prohibit the free exercise thereof. That's what it says. There's no such thing in the Constitution, as the best I can determine, that talks about the separation of church and state. That was in papers from Jefferson that warned that our government should never be in a position, nor should we allow it, to dictate a particular religion to us as a people. So let me just talk about 2 different words. One is endorsement, and the other is acknowledgement. That's the common sense approach, I think, that was intended by our forefathers. When we allow and acknowledge a grave or a monument to either a soldier, a firefighter, a police officer, and that particular individual and his or her family have made a decision that they want a cross, a Star of David, or a crescent on that monument, that's their decision. It's not the government's decision. It's not the government endorsing it. It's acknowledging, and being on public land should further emphasize the importance of common sense. When that soldier that firefighter, that police officer made the ultimate sacrifice, he or she didn't say, except for public property. They didn't say, only on private property shall my monument and remembrance be considered. We as a people own that responsibility to acknowledge that that particular monument is for those individuals, such as the monument in Woonsocket, for Leclerc and Gagne. Those are the soldiers that made the ultimate sacrifice. Leclerc never even made it back to this country. His body still rests in France. That monument, some well over 80 years ago, was designed, acknowledged by the people of that time as being important to that culture and that society. We have, in 2012 and many years to come, we have the responsibility to honor that and sustain it, to protect, defend it, and make sure that it's not forgotten. It is historically important for all of us to continually remember, honor, memorialize, and particularly our veterans. They paid the ultimate sacrifice. Now, when someone comes by and they're offended, well, I'm offended by them being offended. Where do I get any kind of a say, other than to go and use our Constitution to hopefully have them understand the common sense approach to the intent of separation of church and state means the Congress of the United States and the state of Rhode Island will pass no law dictating a particular religion, nor will it preclude the free practice thereof. That's the intent. And let me close with an observation of this whole debate. If there was ever such, and I've not, to the best of my knowledge, ever have seen anything in the several hundred years that this country has been in existence, never once, anywhere, any place, any time, have I seen the United States or the state of Rhode Island dictate a particular religion, ever. And the fact that we can have a discussion and common sense approach, that when you can talk about Arlington, and the very fact that there are crosses, there are Stars of David, there are crescents, that in itself should tell us no one is dictating, nor ever they will, about what will go on a monument to that particular soldier. And the same thing should apply here. And I would also suggest and leave you with something. This monument in Woonsocket is where the line in the sand needs to be drawn. Because I've heard, and I bring to this discussion 48 years of military service. I've had, unfortunately, to mobilize thousands of kids and put them in harm's way. Unfortunately, I've also had to preside over some 20 funerals. The one thing that you don't have are words that you can offer that family, except to tell them we'll never, ever forget and we'll always respect that they did make that ultimate sacrifice. Once we falter on that, then we will have reached the end of the United States of America and the state of Rhode Island as we know it. This is something, this piece of legislation may not be a fix-all, but it'll be a wonderful statement that it cannot and will not happen in Rhode Island to any veteran, firefighter, police officer, or anyone else. I agree, there needs to be some mechanical change on who, in fact, can designate a Category 1 and other particular mechanics of it. That's not the issue. The issue is we need to protect, defend, and absolutely ensure that the monuments erected in this state will be sustained as is, where they are, and it will not happen in Rhode Island to allow future litigation to take place. And one last thing. Arlington has been a discussion point where they have talked about removing crosses and other religious paraphernalia from those graves. The Exeter Cemetery is state property. That could also be a target. So I'll leave you with my observation and my acumen as it relates to dealing with thousands of veterans and their families. They're looking at us. They're looking at you. They're looking at this effort because they need to understand, as Washington said, if they're going to put their sons and daughters in harm's way, there has to be a set of values in this country that we have endorsed since our very beginning in 1776. If we change it in 2012, we may not be here as we know ourselves in 2013. In all due respect, I ask that you consider this favorably with those changes that you recognize need to be done. But it needs to stop here, and it needs to start here in the state of Rhode Island to be looked at by the rest of the country, that it will not happen in this state, at this time, in any place, on any monument, period. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Are there questions for the general? There being none, thank you. John Deneen from the ACLU.
I'd like to thank the chair and members of the committee. And I feel very much to be in the minority here this evening after listening to the previous speakers. Is that better? Again, I'm John Deneen. I'm an attorney in Rhode Island, and I'm here on behalf of the Rhode Island affiliate
Arlington has been a discussion point where they have talked about removing crosses and other religious paraphernalia from those graves. The Exeter Cemetery is state property. That could also be a target. So I'll leave you with my observation and my acumen as it relates to dealing with thousands of veterans and their families. They're looking at us. They're looking at you. They're looking at this effort because they need to understand, as Washington said, if they're going to put their sons and daughters in harm's way, there has to be a set of values in this country that we have endorsed since our very beginning in 1776. If we change it in 2012, we may not be here as we know ourselves in 2013. In all due respect, I ask that you consider this favorably with those changes that you recognize need to be done. But it needs to stop here, and it needs to start here in the state of Rhode Island to be looked at by the rest of the country, that it will not happen in this state, at this time, in any place, on any monument, period. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Are there questions for the general? There being none, thank you. John Deneen from the ACLU.
I'd like to thank the chair and members of the committee. And I feel very much to be in the minority here this evening after listening to the previous speakers. Is that better? Again, I'm John Deneen. I'm an attorney in Rhode Island, and I'm here on behalf of the Rhode Island affiliate of the American Civil Liberties Union to speak in opposition to this bill in particular, not to try any particular case that may happen or may not happen. In fact, that's one of the main points I want to make. Before getting to the main point, though, I would like to reiterate a couple of the problems that have been discussed already. The bill, as it's presently written, states not only that it could be any elected official who would simply make the designation, but that person could make the designation about any place, any item, anywhere in the state. So a single official from one town theoretically could go around the state making designations. And the other thing about this bill is that a designation is then a done deal. It is final. There's no appeal. There's no further review. That's it. And it is simply a fiat. It is a unilateral declaration by a single person. And it can be about any religious icon, statue, anything, anywhere in the state. The provision about the money, even if it's changed from the current version of $1 million, if it's any amount of state-guaranteed funding, I think there are concerns there. First of all, this bill binds the Office of the Attorney General to defend every case, even if it's a purely municipal case. The Attorney General's office will be required to defend the case. That's an enormous step for the Attorney General's resources, both legally and financially. It'll no longer be a municipal case. Similarly, I think the problem that can arise is that the municipality then can say, sure, let's go to the Supreme Court because it's not our problem. The legislature and the taxpayers in general in Rhode Island will pay for this. So that cuts both ways in terms of how it affects the decision-making process. There is an issue of the Supremacy Clause. This bill, as written, seeks to simply declare that a federal statute is not the law of the land. 42 United States Code, Section 1988, would be overturned by this piece of legislation. That raises enormous Supremacy Clause problems. And in the audacity of a state law simply announcing that a federal statute is overturned is breathtaking. However, the biggest problem is this, and this is one that I'm not sure is fixable. This bill violates principles of separation of powers, really, by attempting to convert an individual fact-based determination of how to apply a constitutional provision to any particular set of circumstances. That's normally a judicial function, into a unilateral act of designation by an elected official. The game's over. The designation takes place. There's no appeal. It's over. It's done. There's no more trial where you weigh all of the facts and circumstances of each case, difficult as that may be, and apply a constitutional set of standards to those particular facts. That's why we have trials. They're often painful, they're often controversial, but that's the whole point. If you're a Boston Celtics fan, for this coming Saturday night, it would be much better, I imagine, to simply designate that they will be the winner of Saturday night's game, or the deciding seventh game. That way you can avoid, whether you're a player or a fan, the pain and uncertainty of going through the contest. It is difficult. It's a lot easier to simply designate the outcome and skip the process. This bill is really an example of the worst fears of the founders of our Constitution, who believed that separation of church and state was needed as much, if not more, to protect religion from the state as it was to protect the state from religion. This bill allows a single government official to declare that even a sacred religious symbol, icon, inscription, or statue has attained a secular value. Again, end of discussion. It has attained a secular value by decree of a government official. In short, the government can attack religion in the guise of protecting it, similar to a city government sticking Frosty the Snowman and Rudolph into a public Christian manger scene in order to protect the religious symbols from those advocating separation of church and state. No government official should be permitted to decree that a religious symbol no longer has a religious meaning, that it has become somehow predominantly secular. In my city of Cranston a few years back, I remember driving by City Hall lawn at Christmas time and observing the manger scene with an inflatable Frosty and inflatable Rudolph right next to the wise men. I personally thought it was awful that this maybe is the end result of what happens when state and church get together on the same lawn. I'm troubled by that. The people who founded these principles, this is not some recent annoying little technicality in our Constitution, this business about separation of church and state. It's not some little invention of Madeleine Murray O'Hair a few years ago. This was a foundational principle of people like James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and before them, Roger Williams, who came here to this state because he was in the minority from Massachusetts, very much in the minority. And the whole point was separation of church and state, unlike what was happening in Massachusetts in the 1600s. This is a bedrock principle. It's not a technicality. And it is there to protect religion from the state as much as it is to protect the state from religion. Both spheres will be much healthier if they stay separate. I'm troubled today by the fact that at this very hearing, we're getting into discussing back and forth whether or not a cross is really a religious symbol. That's exactly the kind of discussion that I think, with all due respect, does not belong in the halls of government. Just as government officials in a city hall should not be sticking Rudolph into the manger scene, I think that this body has much better and much more important things to work on than to engage in debate about whether a cross carries religious symbols or has attained a secular meaning. That's dangerous for government to engage in that debate. That's the reason for the separation, and James Madison knew that. He was a member of a House of Representatives in Virginia before the Revolution, and some of his colleagues thought he was somewhat of a fanatic about separation of church and state. He opposed giving even a few pennies to a church in Virginia, and some of his colleagues said, "James, really, relax, it's only a few pennies." And James Madison said, "No, we need to take alarm at the very first affront to these principles. We can't wait until it's too late." Rhode Island started because of the danger of what happens when church and state get too close together. A Rhode Island woman named Ann Dyer was hung on the Boston Common for the crime of being a Rhode Islander and a Quaker, a minority. That was her only crime. She was hung. She made the mistake of going back to Boston. That's all she did. She was a woman from Rhode Island who was a Quaker. I'm also deeply disturbed today at the discussion about minority versus majority, and that it's time to put an end to these troublesome minority points of view. Rhode Island didn't even agree to go along with the American Constitution until the Bill of Rights was in there to protect minority rights. We do have a democracy, and on many principles, majority rules, but the whole purpose of the Bill of Rights is to counteract that and to protect a minority, even an annoying minority, even an unpopular minority. That's what's been going on in this country for centuries is the struggle to protect that minority. And we can't simply decree or designate that these issues go away. It does not involve disrespect to any particular group, to any veterans of any wars that this country has fought. It involves the deepest respect for one of the founding principles of this country, which is to protect religion and to protect the state by making sure that they don't set up their displays on the same front lawn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deneen. Are there questions from the committee?
I actually have a question.
Representative Marcella?
Thank you. I'm certainly not a First Amendment scholar, and I haven't studied the issue, but I'm a little concerned about, well, first of all, I'm not so sure that this monument, and we're talking about this bill, but I'm not so sure that this monument would not survive a constitutional challenge based upon the history behind it and whatnot, much like the Ten Commandments on I believe, the courthouse steps in Alabama survived a First Amendment challenge. So I don't want to get into a debate about whether it would or would not. I ultimately believe it would be up to the courts if it gets that far. But I was wondering, though, I think the most intriguing part of this bill is that certainly as a state, we could expand the jurisdiction of the Attorney General's office and say, on these types of challenges, especially in the financial times that we're facing, and these types of challenges, that it is the policy of the state that we want the Attorney General to expend those resources to defend or prosecute, whatever it is, defend these types of challenges when they come about. And I'm a little concerned, or I guess I didn't understand your opposition to that, because you indicated that you get through these results from a trial. They're long, they're arduous, but they're also very expensive. And as you know, our cities and towns are not doing so well right now, and in the case of Woonsocket, they're pretty much on the brink. I know there's no lawsuit pending. I don't know if there would ever be. But what's the opposition as from a state policy to allow the Attorney General, indicating that in any case in which the municipality is sued on a violation of First Amendment right, particularly to monuments or whatever it happens to be, that the state would step in and defend that, if the Attorney General believed there was a defendable case there, because ultimately the Attorney General is the one who's going to have to weigh the validity of the claim. So I'm, especially in a close case like this, because I do believe that this monument if it goes to a challenge, I do believe that there's a good chance that it would survive a First Amendment challenge. But I don't want you to talk about that issue, but I want you to talk about what's the opposition of letting the Attorney General's office assume jurisdiction on behalf of these cities and towns.
I think it's true that a lot of municipalities have severe budget concerns, as does the state, however. And one of my concerns, based on experience of often litigating civil rights claims with cities and towns, is that if the state is on the hook for the cost, then it'll be a lot easier for a local official to say, sure, let's go for it. I'm up for re-election. I want to do the popular thing by making some noise about this issue, and we don't have to worry about paying for it because the state will have to pay for it. I have seen, sad to say, instances where municipal officials have defied their own solicitor's advice about whether something is constitutional and said, let's go for it anyway. There's an election coming up. I'd like to fight this, win, lose, or draw, and we'll just do it. That attitude, I think, could be expanded if the state is on the hook for defending this. And I'm not saying that you can't do that, but I'm not sure it's a wise policy. I don't see anything in the bill that gives the Attorney General's office the discretion to say, no, we don't think this is a particularly good case to defend. It seems to me the way it's written anyway, it says the Attorney General's office must defend. And this area is, there are some extremely difficult, close cases, and the Woonsocket case may well be, which isn't even a case yet, may well be an example of that one. I'm not here to debate the pros and cons of that. Again, that's why there are trials, because those are incredibly difficult cases with nuances that are really important. An example, just one little example, there's a huge difference between a cross on an individual soldier's grave, because that soldier was Christian, and a cross at the entrance to the government cemetery. The factors like that have to be weighed back and forth in every case. Every case is different. They come down to a host of major problems and issues and complexities, and they're not easy. None of this is easy. This is a difficult area, and it probably always will be. And that's one of the great things, I think, about our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. The urge to simplify it, to make it neat, to simply announce the result is ultimately dangerous, I think. But in answer to the question, I think there is a huge danger that municipal officials won't engage in the very difficult back and forth, which I observed. I attended a public meeting in Cranston where the discussion about whether to appeal took place. And it was a difficult discussion. It was painful. It was a divided vote. It was a close vote. But it was democracy in action. And without that, if people could say, let's not worry about it, the AG and the state will take care of it, then I think you won't have that difficult discussion taking place. That's the problem I have with it, not that you can't turn all of these cases over to the AG. The other practical problem is, I suspect, and I'm not speaking for the AG's office, but I suspect they'd want more resources from you.
Thank you, Mr. Dineen.
Thank you very much.
Other questions from the committee? Thank you. That will conclude testimony on House Bill 8143, which has been held for further study. Representative Marcello moves, Representative Morrison seconds a motion to adjourn, and that motion prevails. I would like to thank Representative Morrison, Representative Blazejewski, and Representative Marcello for being with us tonight. I am Representative Edith Agello. Good night.